White Ribbon is the new film by Michael Haneke, and it was the winner of the Golden Palm, the top award at the Cannes Film Festival this year. I think a very popular choice for that award. Haneke, for the first time in a while, returns to, he's actually Austrian, but he returns to Germany and to the German language to make a film about a village on the eve of World War I. And suddenly a number of incidents begin happening in this village. Someone is knocked off a horse while they're riding it. There are other incidents of people being hurt somewhat unexpectedly and by unknown forces. And suspicion begins to sort of generate that it's some kind of movement of the local children against the local adults. And because of that, all kinds of measures are put into place to survey the children, to make sure that they're towing the line, doing what they're supposed to. Of course, Haneke uses this incident as a kind of study for the origins of fascism, the origins of how was it that just a few years later, the film is set about 1913, 1914, these young people would be those adults who would accept Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime.
Naja, diese Zeit und dieses Land.
I chose this period in this country because I think that it offers the most prominent horror of extremism of any kind. That said, however, I think that it would be an error to reduce the film rather to this specific period and to this specific country.
Ich denke, die Deutschen können den Film ruhig als
I think that the Germans should see this film as a film about Germany. However, I think in other countries people should see the film as something about their own countries.
So in a way, it's a film about how certain kinds of attitudes, certain kinds of behavior, certain kinds of social acceptances come to the fore and create a generation. And at the end, you sort of feel that you've just seen the beginning of what Germany was going to become.
Has anybody seen White Ribbon? I just have to say, I saw it yesterday at 10:30 in the morning. I haven't stopped thinking about it. As a filmmaker, it's always inspiring and humbling to see your work. So it's a real thrill to meet you. I guess I just want to start, I mean, a lot of these questions might be from a real filmmaker point of view, because I would love to steal some knowledge from you. But first, how does something like this get started? Does it start thematically, or in research, or in emotional story? Where do you begin something like White Ribbon?
Ja, ich muss dazu sagen, die Geschichte ist.
I have to say that it's a very old story. I wrote the script 10 years ago. I wasn't able to make it before because I couldn't get the financing for it. But in fact, the idea for the story began another 10 years before that. So my memories of how it actually originated are quite hazy.
Aber die Grundidee war, einen Chor, einen Kinderchor zu zeigen, der.
The starting point, however, for the script many years ago was I had the idea of making a film about a children's choir in Protestant Germany. Children who's elevated to the level of absolute ideology, the preaching of their parents, and who then judge their parents on the basis of that ideology.
How do you cast children?
Ja. Naja, das war meine große Angst bei dem Film natürlich, dass ich irgendwann.
I have to say that my great fear before was that we'd be during pre-production at some time I'd have to tell my producers that I couldn't find the right children for certain of the roles. For that reason, we started looking for the children 6 months before pre-production actually began. For the 15 roles that we needed, we interviewed over 7,000 children to find the right ones.
Are they actors or are they?
No, es gab Einzelne, die schon mal in anderen Filmen gespielt haben, aber es ist in Europa nicht so wie in Amerika, dass man richtige professionelle Schauspieler hat. Die gibt es eigentlich nicht.
It really depended. Most of them had no prior experience in making films. It really depended. In Europe, we don't have the same tradition as in the United States, where there really are professional children's actors. But it was mixed. Some of the children did have experience. The boy who plays the older son of the pastor, for example, had played a large part in a television film, but most had never acted before. Eva, for example, who plays the love interest of the teacher. She was 16 when we shot the film and had never acted before.
So let's keep talking about White
Man
Ribbon.
muss vielleicht zu den Kindern noch dazu sagen, dass wir bei diesem Casting natürlich nicht nur darauf geguckt haben, dass die Kinder begabt sind, sondern auch, dass sie Gesichter haben,
I have to say also about casting the children that another concern of ours was that we had to choose children whose physiognomies, whose faces corresponded to the images, our expectations of them. We know a lot of photographs from that period, so they had not only to be talented actors but also to look the part.
Wir hatten das gleiche Problem mit den Statisten, also diese Leute, die da in der Kirche sitzen. Man kennt das ja, also wie früher Bauern ausgesehen haben, also von Wind und Wetter gegerbt. Und die jetzigen deutschen
we had the same problem in dealing with extras because we were looking at the people we see in the church and at the harvest celebration. Our expectations from the pictures we've seen, we want faces that have been marked by wind and weather in the time they've spent outdoors, whereas today's farmers, of course, in Germany sit in air-conditioned tractors and don't look at all, they look just like you and I.
So something like when the teacher talks to the blonde, the oldest daughter of the pastor, and the kind of awkward son. Are they playing one level, or are they playing something more complex? Are they telling the truth?
That's your decision.
But when you direct them, do you direct them very simply and give them something simple, knowing that audiences will read into it?
They should simply say it in a manner that's credible, so the audience will believe them. It's a sign of bad films that the audience always is supposed to know when someone's lying.
In any one scene, you have more complexity in characters than an entire Hollywood film. Okay, the big question.
Oh.
No, my question. There we go. Do you know who did it?
Maybe.
I actually have a theory, but I'm not going to talk about it. When you're constructing scenes, are you thinking about who's guilty?
Also ich versuche die Geschichten immer so zu konstruieren, dass es verschiedene wahrscheinliche Möglichkeiten gibt.
I always try to construct my stories in such a way that several different explanations are possible and credible. If there's only one possible explanation, then it's obvious. If if no explanations make sense or are conceivable, then it's simply stupid. My attempt is to write the story in such a way that I give the spectator a possible freedom in interpreting the story, the same freedom that spectators have in other art forms.
Das Problem ist ja, dass man gegenüber jeder anderen eine gewisse Freiheit hat.
There's in all other art forms, there's a great area of freedom for the spectator in painting and sculpture and musical compositions. Then it's up to the recipient of the work of art to interpret it. Where language is used, then already the situation becomes more complicated and the sense of freedom is more restricted. As soon as you specify things, as soon as you name them, then you are limiting artistically the recipient's room for interpretation. Nonetheless, however, in language, with literature, there's still a great deal more freedom because the images are created by the recipient in his or her mind. In film, however, the director robs the audience of that possibility, replaces their images with their own images. So my intention is, as much as possible, to restitute at least part of that freedom to the audience and restitute part of their ability to create their own images and own explanations.
And can you talk about how you do that visually?
Wie ich das visuell tue? Naja, durch Verwendung des
I excite that through the use of what I don't show, what takes place off camera. Everything that I don't show, everything that I only allude to, excites the imagination of the spectator. And in the same way, all the questions that I raise but don't answer, I invite the audience, I lead the audience to complete with their own answers. In that way, they don't digest, they don't finish with the film as easily as they would if I provided all the answers.
Sehr wichtig, sehr wichtig.
I'm very interested in post-production because in post-production you can correct any number of elements that you didn't succeed in doing while making the film. The picture editing itself goes very quickly, unlike, as is so often the case in the United States, where the same scene is shot from many different angles and points of view. I have storyboarded the scenes beforehand. I know exactly what I need for my edit and shoot accordingly. So for example, in The Piano Teacher, then I was able to edit that film, do the picture editing in only 3 weeks. It becomes a little more complicated in longer scenes where you've perhaps done 20 takes of the same scene and where you have to look at each take and weigh them and evaluate them. That takes some time. On the other hand, however, the sound editing took me 3 months for the film. I'm someone who's extremely involved with sound, involved with the sound post-production, because I work with my ear, because I hear through my ear. I work with actors through my ear. Prior to making television films and films for the cinema, I spent 20 years as a stage director, and inevitably during our rehearsals, and I'd be looking down, have my head in my hands, and be looking down, and the actors would complain that I wasn't looking at them, and I would reply that I hear you better, I see you better when I'm looking down, because I hear the mistakes you make, I hear how you're acting, and I can work with them better. So in post-production, especially in sound, you can improve any number of weaknesses in the film.
Also entdecken tue ich da weniger. Ich entdecke höchstens die Mängel, die ich dann zu beseitigen suche. Die Mängel, also die Fehler. Ne? Das ist das Einzige, was man entdecken kann.
It's not so much that I discover the approach, the things that I'm looking for during post-production, but rather I discover the mistakes in the film that I try to avoid. It's something that I try to make clear to my students, the fact that film is recorded with 2 machines. There's the camera and there's also the tape recorder. But film students usually tend to ignore the tape recorder and concentrate on the camera, whereas you can do so much incredibly with sound. It's also possible, for example, if despite the numerous takes you still haven't got exactly the right delivery of a line, you can actually cut in a sentence, you can change certain things, cut out a little syllable, a hesitation. That's an incredible amount of work, but it's very productive, and it's a part of filmmaking process that I enjoy inordinately.
Well, thank you, Mikhail, for being here. Thank you for translating.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure.